China's foreign ministry said that Hamas and Fatah agreed to end their divisions and form an interim national unity government during negotiations in China that ended today. What's your take on this agreement?
So we have not yet reviewed the text of the so-called Beijing Declaration. Of course, that we will do that. But as we have made clear for months, Hamas is a terrorist organization, something that we obviously made clear before October 7th. But when it comes to governance of Gaza at the end of the conflict, there can't be a role for a terrorist organization. Hamas has long been a terrorist organization. They have the blood of innocent civilians, both Israeli and Palestinian, on their hands. And so when you look at the post-conflict governance of Gaza, we do see, as we made clear, we want to see the Palestinian Authority governing a unified Gaza and the West Bank, but no, we do not support a role for Hamas.
Blinken is set to speak with Wang Yi in Laos. Will he raise this, and what's your evaluation of China's role in these talks? Is it helpful in trying to reach a ceasefire deal?
So I don't have any, as I said, I don't want to pass judgment on this declaration that came out today beyond what I just said, because we haven't reviewed the full text. I want us to be able to look at it and give a more thoughtful response, which of course we will do. But when it comes to China's role, I think, as you know, the Secretary has talked to Wang Yi a number of times about playing a constructive role in Middle East diplomacy since the outbreak of the conflict. He called Wang Yi from Saudi Arabia on our very first trip to the Middle East just a week after October 7th, and he's spoke to him on the phone a number of times and spoke to him when we've had the occasion to travel to China and when Wang Yi has had the occasion to travel here. And what we have generally encouraged China to do is to use their influence with countries in the region, especially countries with whom they have a relationship with where we don't, to discourage any escalation in the conflict. So, for example, Iran, which is continues to finance and support proxies that have launched attacks on Israel, or in the case of the Houthis, have launched attacks on commercial shipping. We have used China to use its influence to try to bring those attacks to an end, and we'll continue to do that.
And then Israel's foreign minister said that instead of rejecting terrorism, Abbas embraces murderers and rapists of Hamas. Are you concerned that this could complicate reaching a ceasefire deal, this response from Israel?
We don't think that anything related to this declaration should in any way have an impact on the ongoing discussions to reach a ceasefire. As you've heard us say, we think it's an agreement is in sight. We think it's achievable. Doesn't mean we'll get there, but we have made progress in the talks. And no, I don't think either this announcement or the reaction to it should play a role in making making a conclusion of those talks more difficult.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. Just on what Daphne just asked. So you're saying that it doesn't matter whether Hamas actually has a unity government with this, let's say, Fatah and the other groups and so on, and basically announce that they adhere to the principles enunciated by this group, by the PLO, and so on. So they have no role to play whatsoever?
So, Said, they have not announced that they accept the principles of the PLO. That is an important point that you make. Hamas has not renounced terrorism. It has not renounced the use of violence to achieve its political aims. It has not renounced the destruction of the state of Israel, something the PLO has done. It remains a terrorist organization. It remains committed to killing civilians. It remains committed to bringing about the destruction of the state of Israel. So no, we do not see an organization that believes in those tactics and believes in carrying out terrorism as a suitable organization to govern the Palestinian people.
Okay, so in fact, in their statements and so on, and their discussions and their interviews, and we have seen their spokesmen engage on Arab satellite TV all the time, and they actually say that they will go along with the the principles of the PLO. They accept the two-state solution. They accept whatever agreement that can come about. They are focused on the ceasefire, and achieving a ceasefire. You don't think there is anything positive in these gestures? The fact that they most recently spoke about a two-state solution as a solution to the conflict.
They have not in any way committed to a two-state solution. And I just make clear, they could have, in the context of this declaration today, signed on to the principles of the PLO, and they did not. So maybe a spokesman makes statements from time to time, but Hamas as an organization has not renounced its support for violence, its support for terrorism, or its commitment to the destruction of the state of Israel, and that's an important point.
So, just, I don't want to belabor the issue, but, looking at how much influence Hamas has had in Gaza over the past, for a very, very long time, 17, 18 years and so on, and do you see a situation where they actually can be completely taken out, or can be decapitated, as the Israelis just to use the Israeli term and so on, from the political scene. I mean, they have
Yeah, so-
they are embedded in the society
yeah.
itself.
So a few things about that. As you've heard us say before, we of course believe that Israel can achieve military aims when it comes to the defeat of Hamas, but that is different, as you make clear in your question, to political aims. And we think that ultimately the best way to ensure that Hamas does not regain strength and reassert its position inside Gaza is to offer a different political path forward for the Palestinian people. And that's what we are committed to doing. That's what we have been trying to work on with all of our partners in the region. But I do think that there's another point that deserves to be made here, Said, which is the Palestinian people in Gaza ought to have a say in this as well. They ought to have the foremost say in choosing who their leaders are. And I obviously can't speak for the Palestinian people, but if you look at the death and destruction that Hamas's decision to launch the attacks of October 7th has brought on Gaza, there's no one that has brought more pain and suffering to the people in Gaza than Hamas, through their decisions first to launch the attacks of October 7th, and then their ongoing decision, which continues today, to hide among civilian communities and use civilians as human shields. So that's ultimately something that the Palestinian people have to speak to and speak to through their representatives. But I will say on behalf of the United States, we do not see it in any way as acceptable for a terrorist organization to play a role in governance, because you would see what you have always seen from Hamas, which is attacks on civilians, terrorism, and a further continuation of the conflict that has plagued the people of Israel and Palestinians for decades.
Well, I agree 100% with you that the final say ought to be for the Palestinian people and nobody else. I agree with you with that. Let me ask you about prospects for the ceasefire. Are you inclined to believe that the Israeli Prime Minister may surprise everybody and announce that he agrees to the terms of the ceasefire? What is your reading of what's going on? Because we are probably at the point where every little detail has been discussed, every iota or every I has been dotted and every T is crossed and so on.
So I don't know what the Prime Minister will say either in his speech to Congress or in any of his other public remarks. I'll leave that to him. But the discussions continue, and there are a number of issues at play that we're still working to reach conclusion on that we have not yet reached conclusion.
My final question is on, there was a report that Israel bombed a tent of journalists. I wonder if you know about this report. And of course, there's been something like 160 Palestinian journalists that have been killed thus far. Why is there no outrage on the fate of journalists in Gaza?
So I think there's a great deal of outrage about the deaths of journalists. You have heard us speak to this, not just me, but the Secretary has spoken to this a number of times and made clear the importance we place on the work that journalists do in conflict zones around the world, and of course especially in Gaza, where we, in many cases, the world only knows about what's happening inside Gaza because journalists who risk their lives, put their lives on the line to bring us the news, are there every day reporting it. And so we mourn the death of any journalist just as we mourn the death of any civilian. And it is why, again, we are working so hard to try to reach a ceasefire. It's why the president has put his own political muscle behind this. It's why the secretary has worked on it. It's why others in the administration have worked on it, because we believe ultimately the only way to stop the suffering of civilians, all civilians in Gaza, journalists, others who